And now something completely different.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking to you live just outside
I like to think balding is just God's way of saying, now let's see you get laid.
Is it true that if you don't use it, you lose it?
What I'd really like to do is put the greatness of this man in perspective.
The hair loss community has a lot to be thankful for, having you as a spokesperson.
You mean you just call this guy up?
About life and about reality.
And now, America's #1 reality radio show for men. Live from Los Angeles, it's Spencer Kobren's The Bald Truth.
Hey guys, welcome to The Bald Truth UK. So great to be here. Let me give out the phone number. It's 0203-3724-683. As always, look, if you're new to the program, let me tell you who I am and why I'm here. I'm a consumer advocate for men and women dealing with hair loss. I am the author of The Bald Truth and the Truth About Women's Hair Loss. And, this was a place that was created about 14 years ago here in the U.S. to provide hair loss sufferers with a platform where they could just learn about anything and everything hair loss, a safe place to help navigate and to learn about this insane $3.5 billion a year industry. And, along the way, what we were learning is that as the word spread, as people found out about what we were doing, the fact that we were really just trying to provide hair loss sufferers with a place to really get completely objective information in an industry, again, that is, not only is it huge, but it is probably one of the biggest snake pits you could ever imagine. It is so unfortunate how easy it is to take advantage of vulnerable hair loss sufferers. And look, I am one of those guys. So as things evolved, obviously our words spread, and we were getting countless emails to all of our resources from UK listeners, guys who were listening to archives of the program, guys who wanted to be a part of the show but couldn't call in because we weren't on during a reasonable hour. This is why The Bald Truth UK was finally put out there, and we decided to really, take a closer look at the UK market. And I got to tell you guys, man, I don't know what's worse, to be honest with you. I personally think, at least at this stage, that the UK market, the UK hair loss market, is even more treacherous than it is here in the US. And that, for me to say that, it's got to be really effing bad. So I want you guys to know that we are here to help guide you in a safe direction. And as some of the guys who have already watched the program know, my sidekick in this endeavor, I can't speak tonight as usual, is none other than Spencer Specs Stevenson, who is a consumer advocate in his own right, a guy that has been through the mill, so to speak, when it comes to dealing with this industry. He's had 10 hair transplants, believe it or not, which is insane to me, but I certainly understand. You take a look at him now, it's unbelievable how great he looks, but he is a guy that has been burned in the past. That's why I wanted him to be part of this broadcast. That's why I wanted him to, have the ability to reach out to you guys who are considering surgical hair restoration, so he can kind of give his, his personal experience. Listen, I know the industry for what it is. Fortunately, I've never had to have a hair transplant because I've been lucky enough to slow the progression of my hair loss with FDA-approved products. I have, been lucky enough to still maintain some semblance of a full head of hair, while, of course, it's basically a creative comb-over. I wear makeup on the back of my scalp, but I'm 47 years old, so I feel extremely fortunate. Specs wasn't quite as fortunate early on as far as being able to, prevent further hair loss, at least at the beginning, but he learned the ropes, and unfortunately he learned it the hard way, so that's why he's part of the broadcast. Let me say hi to Specs, and then we're going to talk about a special guest that we have. Specs, how are you, man?
Yeah, thanks, Spence. Thanks for the introduction. I'm really well, thank you, and really looking forward to the show tonight. We have got a very special guest calling in. But I mean, in brief, just to summarize with regards to however Spencer's introduced me as having 10 hair transplants, they have all been relatively small hair transplants. I started out over 10 years ago and had very outdated, inappropriate surgery by one clinic in particular. I had 4 on the bounce, and then that led me into a repair journey. But all things considered, I'm very fortunate to be where I am at now, and ultimately the secret to my success, regardless of the hair transplants, is FDA-approved medication. I owe a lot to finasteride. Without that, I certainly wouldn't be here now. That's for certain.
Well, since I don't mean to cut you off, but since the program was actually first aired a couple of months ago, we've been getting a lot of press, and one guy that decided to pick up on this movement, so to speak, was a presenter and producer for the BBC Radio. And Jolyon, please correct me if I mispronounce your name, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Jolyon Jenkins. And
Jolyon.
Jolyon.
But Jolyon, I'm used to both. So
yeah, look,
either is fine.
I'm American. What am I going to do? I actually never heard that name. It's a great name.
Nobody in Britain's heard of it either, so,
Well, I'm going to try to say it again. Jolyon?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, so Jolyon, you were obviously intrigued by what we are doing here at the Bald Truth, and also intrigued by the entire UK hair loss industry as a whole. You contacted us, and you put together what I would say, and I'm not just stroking you here, probably one of the most in-depth and pretty accurate portrayal of how hair loss affects young guys and older guys alike, and also how the industry kind of operates. I thought you did a great job.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's very odd. It's very nice to be with you because I've interviewed both you and Specs, and so it's an interesting experience for me to be on the other side of the microphone, so to speak. And but it's nice. I'm very grateful because you were both extremely helpful to me. Specs in particular, who I met twice, and
that's great.
Met him in his home, and he's even examined my scalp, so I feel I have a intimate relationship. I've examined his as well, so I have an intimate relationship with him. So
we are very intimate, Johnny, but let's keep that to ourselves for after
yeah, well, there was, and I don't know if it wasn't too homoerotic, was it? But it was
far from it. Far from it. But a pleasure to have you on the show, and yeah, quite ironic now you are on the receiving end of being interviewed. But it was it was fantastic to meet you, and one of the best interviews I've had, and I think you put a fantastic piece together, and hopefully, you never know, you might get the opportunity to do another one. And I was fortunate to meet you 2 times, and you definitely got a great deal of content together, and you certainly informed a lot of people. I know it's had a lot of views. I've certainly housing the interview on my website personally, and I know it's on the Bald Truth Talk forum. Spencer housed it there as well, and I'm sure it's informed a lot of people. It sort of spread the word, and funnily enough, I'd actually had a call from an auntie who I haven't spoken to in about 8 years. She goes, Specs, or Spencer should I call you, a fantastic interview, and obviously it was quite interesting that she was actually listening to Radio 4 and pulled over because she was a bit in shock.
Well, we got 1 million listeners, I think. So that's live, and I don't know how many pick up on it afterwards. So it had a fair amount of feedback. I wrote an article for the Times as well, which
I saw that.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I haven't followed it up since because I don't, I move on to other things. I mean, I followed it on Twitter, what was happening, but I haven't gone back to the forums because I'm always a bit nervous about what people think of my programs.
Well, I can tell you that, first of all, you did a great job. But let me ask you this. You're a hair loss sufferer yourself. You went out there and you talked about your experience as a hair loss sufferer. You even mentioned, which I thought was interesting, that you put up an online dating profile, one with hair and one without hair. And I thought that was a very interesting part of the piece. Why don't you explain to people exactly what you did?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wanted to find out what the real effect of hair loss was on perceived attractiveness. And there's quite a lot of research on it, which I sort of got my head around, I think, but none of it is really reflecting the real world choices that people make. Because when psychologists do this, they ask people about their preferences, or they do it in the laboratory, getting people to rate photographs and so on, but it's not a real choice which women particularly are making about men in these situations. So,
I agree.
And I guess it would be unethical for psychologists to do that. So I did a very small study, and I'm not the first person to have done this, but it was small, and I don't really know how much weight you can put on it. But I joined a dating site, and I made a profile of myself, which was very bland. It said almost nothing about me. It just said I liked, I think, reading and going to the cinema or something like that. And I had a picture of myself, and I'm as you say, a hair loss sufferer, pretty bald. And then I did this. So I kept it up for 4 days, and just monitored how many views I had. And a view is just a kind of expression of interest. It's not any kind of contact. It's just, is this man attractive enough to click on and just read about him? And then, so then I did it again, but I got myself photoshopped with hair on, and so it was exactly the same profile, but the second time I had hair, and measured the number of views. So without hair, I got 13 views, and with hair I got 20 views. So the effect of losing hair is to make me 35% less attractive.
Yeah,
if you,
and I think that's actually.
I mean, it's you can't really say that these figures mean all that much. It's not. It probably isn't statistically significant. But
well, Jolyon, I can say this, and I mean to cut you off, but I can say that it's probably conservative. I mean, I think that if you actually did a longer, put it out there for a longer amount of time and really saw how many numbers you got, say, in a month's time or something like that, it would be pretty significant.
But if you look at the psychological experiments, I know they're not real life, but they do show an effect, definitely, on
absolutely
attractiveness. But it's not a huge effect, I wouldn't say. I mean, the one that was done, I interviewed this guy. I think he's in Philadelphia, is he? I can't remember where he is, but he's called Al Manis, and he's at an American university. Anyway, so what he finds is that people, the men without hair are certainly perceived as slightly less attractive. But it's not huge. They're also perceived as shorter.
Yes.
Which is a bit strange. And they're also, men without hair are perceived as older. And I think the main effect is just one about age. I think really what you're seeing with all these studies is that not having hair makes you look a few years older, and that has knock-on effects on other aspects of attractiveness. But it doesn't. But the research is quite, it's not conclusive. And for example, it doesn't show that you're less intelligent if you haven't got hair.
Right.
I mean, people don't perceive you as any less intelligent.
Right.
And,
I would actually think that they probably perceive you as being slightly more intelligent in general.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
So there was a good thing.
There was that article, Jolyon. There was an article written. I don't know. Was it in the Times, Spence, in the New York Times, about the bald men were more powerful, or there were more bald men in more powerful?
It was actually.
This is the same thing. This is Al Manis's research. So he went on. He tested a theory of his, and he did it with not just a balding head, but actually a shaved head, and he found a very interesting result, which was that a shaved head makes you appear more dominant. You're definitely less attractive, or slightly less attractive. But if you shave your head, you're more dominant, and you're also perceived as taller. So, it swings and roundabouts. So if you want to be seen as dominant with women, shave your head. Right. If you want to be seen as slightly more attractive and younger, try and get some hair back.
Well, I think it's empowering for a guy to shave his head, and if he can deal with it, doing that really is a huge statement. It's like, you know what, this is who I am, and you know what, I'm not just going to let myself bald naturally and keep the the donor wreath. I am just going to take it all off and say, you know what, screw it. It doesn't matter to me. I am an alpha male or whatever, and just
and I think doing it is a sign that you have you're choosing to break the norm. You're choosing to do something that is kind of unnatural. It says, I am so confident that I can do this thing. I can, but I'm not. I don't know whether this applies outside America, because I think partly it's relying on the American military stereotype of the shaved head.
And
we don't really,
and the media itself, and the media as well, and the way that they portray it. Absolutely. I could tell you that I would look like some guy from the future if I shaved my head. So it would not be.
You don't know. You haven't tried it. Perhaps you should give it a go.
All right, I can do it right now live on the air. I mean, that would be pretty shocking.
Spence, I wouldn't do that if I were you. But anyway, Jolyon, I mean, I'm looking at the page, the BBC Radio 4 page, and at the top, you've obviously had Photoshop. Your hair's been Photoshopped with some grey tints and highlights, and then you can scroll down below and see how you are in actual fact. I actually do feel you do look younger, a lot younger, with the hair on. But obviously that's going to be my opinion. It'd be interesting to see. But that was the actual article that you wrote for the Times, where you had a full-length body shot, didn't you, with hair and without hair, and it was quite a bad Photoshop job done. There's a better Photoshop job done on the BBC.
The Times would be better. The one I did, I got somebody in I think it was India to do it for $5, and they did quite a nice job.
They did a great job.
They made me look quite distinguished. I felt I looked like an American senator.
Right.
But maybe a bit young. But all my friends say, no, don't. You look ridiculous. Stick to how you are. I mean, no one.
Well, tell me about the hairpiece situation. I mean, what was that like? Going to the hair salon.
Well, it wasn't terribly real, but I went and I just had a consultation for a hair system.
Right.
I think they look pretty good. I mean, I put one on. I put it on back to front to start with, which was a bit foolish, and but I didn't have it cut in properly. And I think if I had it cut in, it would have looked good. I mean, it looks a bit mad with at the full length.
Yeah.
But I was a bit shocked at the price compared to a transplant. I mean, but it's if you're young and you're going to do this, it's going to mount up over the years, isn't it? All these hair systems.
Well, absolutely. Listen, you have to. It is a full commitment. You got to be financially and emotionally committed to do any of this stuff. And when it comes to hair systems, I mean, I can tell you, you can go to the best place in the world. The truth is, they have tremendous limitations, and unless you are willing to swap them out, every couple of months, and really maintain them in a way that the company usually doesn't explain to you. It takes a lot more maintenance than these companies explain to you, in my view. Then it's going to be a mess, and it's just not going to be as advertised. I know one guy in particular who is a really, I talk about him on the U.S. show all the time, really highly functioning guy. Has an absolutely beautiful wife. This guy just decided that early on he was going to wear hair, and he did it the right way. But it costs him so much money to do it the right way. It's very difficult for a young guy who's just making an average wage, I think, to take that route.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to wear a system as well. And speaking from personal experience, I mean, I went to one company in particular.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Say again?
I said, that's right. I forgot about your experience.
Yeah, you always seem to forget that one, but relish it when I bring it up.
Just the way.
He likes to poke fun at me, Jolyon. He likes to poke fun at me for all my shortcomings. But anyway, I wore a system, and the point I just quickly want to make is, I can't explain to you how unnatural and how false I felt at that point with having this foreign body put on my head. It just made me 10 times as more self-conscious over my hair than I was with the thinning hair issue. So
I mean, it's a very primitive
certain disposition or a certain type of person I feel that can wear those and wear them with confidence. And another quick point that Spence highlighted there: these companies that sell these hair systems will rarely, if ever, inform you of the full ramifications of the maintenance involved and the upkeep with them, and they downplay those, and they'll always obviously lead you to believe that there's a lot less maintenance than there actually is, and therefore there's a greater expense than they initially advertise. And a lot of people fall into that trap, unfortunately.
But Specs, don't you think the one you had was, I mean, it was quite a while ago now, and it was quite a sort of primitive system you had. Don't you think they've come on quite a long way? I mean, I felt the woman I was talking to was fairly, upfront about how often I'd need to change it and how much it would cost.
Well, Jolyon, that's a fair point. The particular company I dealt with at that time still have a very similar ethos with regards to, oversell and undertell with regards to their systems. I've actually seen some systems in person that are fantastic, and I agree with you. And the particular clinic that you dealt with, when she was being interviewed, she was clearly very forthcoming and transparent with the things that she said. So there are a number of clinics out there. The one I went to, unfortunately, was one that's very highly publicized in the press. They pay a lot on advertising. They're always on the back page of the Sun or the Mirror, in that bottom corner next to the football results. And there are definitely clinics out there and services with regards to hair systems, and there's now a new lace, frontage. But the clinic, I can speak personally, I spoke to a couple of guys recently who have had recent systems off the company I went to, and they look incredibly inappropriate and highly unnatural, and certainly weren't the product that they thought they were buying. They sell it as what's called without giving it away, it's kind of like this membrane where they put hair where it isn't. What they do is they just shave all your hair off, and they stick this whole thing on top of good healthy quality hair, which in turn over time can damage that hair as well. And
you had no idea when you walked into that establishment. You had no idea what you were buying. That's correct?
No, definitely. I wasn't even told. I was certainly. It was they avoided telling me what it was I was actually being sold.
Do you think the lace one? I thought the lace one I saw was a lace one. I thought that was all right. Do you think? I mean, do you think that lace ones have got problems?
I can tell you that I personally think, and I'll let you touch on that in a second, Specs. But I personally think that if it's maintained well. And if, again, I really believe these things have to be switched out on a regular basis. When you're going to one of these clinics or one of these clubs, you're paying a pretty penny for a hairpiece. And honestly, you can get, now these companies don't want you to say this, but you can get the same quality, and in some cases better, online. There's places like coolpiece.com and hairdirect.com who provide a tremendous service to people, and you can basically, if you have the money, you can basically use them kind of like the disposable contact lenses. You pay $300 or $400 for one, and if you can afford to do that and switch that out every month, you will look 100% natural using a full lace system or a lace system maybe with some Polyskin 3. I take issue with some of these clinics, and listen, I understand they have marketing, they have overhead, they have to pay their employees. So there's a cost to it, but they are basically selling a very similar or the exact same product that you can buy online for hundreds of dollars or hundreds of pounds.
Yeah, Jolyon, just to finish off, I agree entirely with what you were saying. You probably have your finger on the pulse more in terms of the recent research you did with regards to good quality hair pieces. It's something I haven't researched personally for a long time. The clinic that I went to, which are still providing a very similar product to the product they were providing 10 years ago, is not very natural looking. It provides like a big ridge on the top of their head. Now, with regards to the lace, I know there's kind of a lace front that can be provided as well, or an entire lace unit. Was the unit that you looked at as part of your research with the individual you interviewed, was the entire unit a lace unit? Then was it very thin and very lightweight?
Well, I saw more than one. I mean, it depends how much maintenance you're prepared to put into it. I think there's ones which have got a kind of more impermeable membrane, which are kind of, fit and forget more, I think is the idea. And then there's the ones which are entirely lace apart from a very small kind of, I don't know what it is. It's a kind of synthetic material at the front, which is where you, or around the edge actually, which is where you glue it. But you only attach it where you haven't got hair. You don't need to shave off. Well, you need to shave off very, very small amounts, just where it's actually going to attach. But you don't need to shave off all of it. But I mean, of course,
like
that
a partial
means
piece.
Well, I will tell you this. You actually went in, Jolyon, to interview these people. And again, I thought she was great. The company that you went to, but normally what they'll do is they'll say that you don't need to shave all of your hair and you can just place it in areas where, where the contact points are. But in the end, when you put it on like that, you're going to be like, wait a second, there's a lot of bulk here. And then they slowly get you into shaving your head. And then they'll say, well, let's cut a little bit more hair away. And then eventually they just shave the entire top of your head. That is exactly, the only way for these things to even look quasi-natural is to have no hair on top.
Well, I don't know. I didn't look into it.
No, sure.
You've spent a lifetime looking at this, and I've just spent.
And isn't that pathetic? How sad is that? This is my life.
No, I think you did a great job. You did a great job. You really unearthed quite a few topics in your interview, most certainly.
No, and I said this on my U.S. show. It was the most in-depth and I think just well done piece, no pun intended, on hair loss and the hair loss industry, because you actually, and I want to get to this point, I don't mean to cut you off, Specs, you actually, for the first time I've ever seen this, focused to some degree on the online world and on the online hair loss community, which is, something that the mainstream media really never looks at in an in-depth way. And you must find it fascinating.
Yeah, well, that's why I really wanted to start. That was my main focus, was the way in which the existence of these forums creates what you call it a hair loss community, which to me still sounds a little strange, but it is. There is an online hair loss community, and I think it has kind of good effects and bad effects. And I was kind of interested in the way that it reinforces people's perception of the problem they've got, and the way in which a kind of culture develops, which is different in each forum, of what the right thing to do is. So, I can't even remember the names of them because there are so many, but there's one which I spent quite a lot of time in, where there were a lot of people doing these experimental self-treatment things, which, on the one hand, I think it's insane. On the other, I think that, you're entitled to put whatever you want on your head. It's almost...
I agree with that.
It's kind of should be protected in the U.S. Constitution, I think, really. And I think I kind of admire these people in a way for, experimenting on themselves. I think, that's the way.
They're like the Neil Armstrong. They're like the Neil Armstrongs of the hair loss world.
Yeah. But looking back over scientific history, many of the kind of great medical breakthroughs have been done by people, by doctors, taking a risk and doing it on themselves. And in a way, these guys are part of that kind of noble tradition. But unfortunately, they don't do it in a way that is really going to find anything out, because they're so sort of anxious about it. They'll try lots of different things at once.
Well, that's the thing.
They'll chop and change.
That's exactly what they do. They do the kitchen sink approach. And listen, I own the most trafficked online hair loss message forum in the world. So I see what goes on Bald Truth Talk.
But yours isn't the most extreme, is it? There are
yes,
there are others which do attract the more fringe elements, and yours is slightly moderated, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is moderated. The thing that we try to do is, sadly, there's a lot of extreme stuff on our site, and you kind of have to, like you said, you realize that even though you may think something's insane, even though you think something could be potentially damaging, who are we to say that someone can't experiment with their own bodies? Who are we to say to kind of cut off that flow of conversation? So we kind of, it's kind of a thin line, kind of a tightrope you have to walk when you're running one of these things. But yeah, I think, listen, I've tried it all, especially when I was younger. And the truth is, when I read about what some of these guys are putting in their bodies or putting on their bodies and where they're buying it from, on the gray market, it sends shivers up my spine, because you have no idea what you're getting in the mail.
Well, that's true. But I looked at there's a chemical which has got quite a lot of attention. It's one of these PGT. I can't remember what they're called. Anyway, these prostaglandin D2 inhibitors.
That's right.
It's called OC00459, and that has been quite. There's been a lot of chatter about that. and you can buy it online from China. I think you can buy it from Canada as well, actually.
Yes.
But I went to speak to the people who make this, because it's actually being developed for asthma, not for hair loss, and it will quite soon be available on the market for asthma, I think, in a couple of years anyway. And although the people who make it are kind of bemused and scared that people are buying a kind of bootleg, counterfeit version of it from China, they also know that if on the forums people suddenly report dramatic results, if they suddenly, if it really is shown to be working, they've got a money spinner on their hands, and they know that their company would be taken over by a big pharmaceutical company, overnight. So I mean, it hasn't happened yet, and it probably won't happen. But I don't think there's such a big difference between what is happening in the respectable pharmaceutical world and what's happening with these online experimenters. I think it wouldn't take a huge amount to suddenly change the game for a small company with a molecule that looks promising.
No, and it would actually change the course of millions upon millions of people's lives if those few guys who are utilizing the message forum to share their information and including their angst and including everything that they're doing when it comes to using these gray market products. I mean, it would be. You're right. I mean, I certainly understand your point. It does, but sometimes, and like you said it, when you read this stuff, you think to yourself, how? I mean, I understand how desperate people are, but it really, these are just young guys. They're not interested in changing the world. They're not interested in the science of it necessarily, even though there's some bro science out there. All they want to do is help themselves, and there's that subset of guys who are willing to do just about everything, including potentially putting their health at risk.
Yeah, but some of them are trying to in a not very systematic way, they're trying to collate the results. They're trying to.
Yes.
They do see themselves as doing science and not just sort of helping themselves. I mean, it's, as you say, it's bro science.
That's right.
It's I don't know. It's going to be interesting in a couple of years' time when this OC459 is going to be on sale in Russia as an asthma treatment. I think it's got past its clinical trials in Russia, so it'll be widely available. I mean, it won't just be a question. You won't have to buy it from China anymore.
Right.
You'll be able to just get it from the Russian grey market, and then. Who knows what will happen.
You also kind of wonder, who's going to be going online, and promoting this. Are they all going to be real patients potentially, or are they going to be guys who are just putting up their own websites and trying to sell this product as a potential hair loss cure? And we've seen that in the industry for years. So sadly, the biggest issue with the online message forum world is you never know where this information is coming from. You never know what the agenda is. Right,
Jolyon, it was really interesting. I mean, I'm interested to know how many times you had to make that phone call to China to get that guy just to agree to sell it to you straight away and ship it off to the UK. Was it just the first call, the first guy that answered, or did you have to make a few attempts at that one?
No, that was the first one. I mean, I knew he was advertising it. I knew his website said it, but I mean, it was more a problem as far as the BBC went, that the fact that he was advertising it didn't prove that he was actually willing to sell it when it came to it. So I just needed the proof that, I had to have the proof that he was actually willing to sell it, as opposed to just saying online that he would sell it. And also, online, they always have these disclaimers saying that we'll only sell it to for research purposes. I mean, they all say that. Or we won't ship it to a country where it would be in breach of patent laws. But in fact, if you look at the forums, you can see that everyone is managing to buy it nonetheless. So I just wanted to check that he really was prepared to sell it to somebody who was clearly just a customer and not just not a research scientist.
Was he aware that you were part of the BBC after that? Was he aware that he went out on the BBC?
No, I don't know whether he's aware.
You should email him the link.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it might have actually increased his business for all I know.
And it probably did. That's just the way this world works, and that's the way the industry works. Even if you put up a question mark, and you're like, this is possibly a questionable practice, and we have no idea whether or not this product can work, people are going to buy it. That's just as soon as it's out there. There was a company that was really well known here in the U.S. as a real snake oiler, and they were selling product hand over fist. They had a doctor on board who basically had lost his license for something, and he was still presenting himself as a doctor and a hair loss expert on television and on radio. And there was a 2020, you're probably familiar with 2020. It's kind of like a news magazine here in the U.S., and there was an expose that was done on this product and on this doctor. And instead of the company trying to hide the fact that they were on 2020, they utilized that fact, and they were saying, as seen on 2020. And
little monkeys.
It was just, I looked at it and I was like, that is brilliant. No matter how bad these guys are, they're just so brazen. So any press is good press. Even if it's questionable, there's a subset of guys who are going to be like, well, you know what? Maybe there's something to this, so I'm going to give it a shot.
Jolyon, can I ask you a quick question while we've got you? With regards to, obviously, as part of your research, and obviously you interviewed quite a few people, did it enable you to get a better view or a better idea on how the emotional trauma of losing your hair, how it affects so many individuals? Did you get a good feel for that? Because I remember you and I spoke about it quite briefly, but with regards to like when you were losing your hair about 20 years ago, that at that point you didn't realize there were any options, or there weren't really any options available, or so you thought. But given the what is available today, that you might have tried to do something about it. Through the research, did you get a chance to interview anybody, or did you get a much greater kind of opinion on how hair loss does actually affect so many people, even though it didn't quite affect you so much?
I really don't know about this, Vex. I find it very hard to judge because it's hard to get a proper sample. I mean, the people who are on the forums are sort of self-selecting, aren't they? I mean, and although there are, thousands of them, maybe, tens of thousands, I don't know, there's an awful lot of them. And as you know, probably everyone listening knows, there's a lot of pretty desperate people out there on the forums, but they're the ones who go on the forums. And in a way, I still think that kind of desperation, that kind of feeling that the world is ending for you, is an unusual one. And certainly, the response I got from the program, I have to say, a lot of people were saying, get a life. It's not the end of the world. I mean, lots of women said to me, lots of women were tweeting, and the buzz online was, this is just bizarre. I don't care. It's what's in a man's head, not what's on his head, which matters. And so I suppose what I felt is there is a kind of there's a significant subset of people who it really does matter to. But I'm not convinced, and I think I disagree with Spencer here, because Spencer thinks that everybody is affected by it, even if they don't think they are. I don't think it does actually have that big an effect on most people, because most people don't think about it. It's the more you think about it, the more you talk about it, the more it seems to be a problem. And I did have this kind of slight feeling as I was doing the program and talking to more and more people that it is a problem, and I did start to feel sort of insecure about it myself. But now, having stopped, now I've moved on to other things. I've stopped worrying about it. I'm not thinking about it anymore.
Well,
so
I can tell you this, that I had yesterday I had our cable guy come here. I had some problems with my bandwidth. Cable guy comes. Guy's actually from Australia. Really nice guy. And we were talking, and he was kind of, he's in my studio, and he was inquisitive, kind of trying to figure out what I did, so I explained it. And he had what I would consider relatively minor recession for a guy his age. And he started to talk about it, and he seemed very confident, and he was very nonchalant about the situation. However, he did have some very telling questions. And he wanted to know, what's out there that's working. Is there something that could be done? While it didn't seem like it was really affecting his life, it appeared to me that he would prefer to have hair, and that he thinks that, and the guy's also a musician, he would prefer to have hair, and he probably thinks that, certain things might be a little easier if he wasn't dealing with hair loss. So when I say that everyone is affected to some degree, I I'm pretty sure that at least at some point in your life, Jolyon, when you first started to lose your hair, you first noticed it, that there was probably a little angst. There was probably something there.
Look, I agree that given the choice, it would be better to have hair. It's that's a no-brainer. But honestly, I didn't really notice it until people started mentioning it, and then I didn't really think about it very much. But then I was in a long-term relationship, and maybe I didn't need to think about it. And then, but when I spoke to Specs, I wasn't actually in a relationship, and now I am, and now I realise that it's a lot of women really don't care about it, and the ones who do care about it aren't worth having.
Well, and I have to say that I absolutely agree with that. And to have we deal with the psychology of the guys who are not equipped to deal with it well. And what I try to let people know is that there is life after hair loss, and really your best bet is to try to let it go. Try to be like you, Jolyon, and move forward with your life. But there are just some guys who they're so ill-equipped to deal with it. And I was one of those guys. When I was a young man, it really, really affected me. And since I've been able to maintain so much hair over the years, I can tell you that if my medication stops working, if, something happens where I continue to progress, I don't know how comfortable I would be without, some hair in my head, and knowing what I know about the field and where I can go to get things done, correctly. I would definitely try to either, whether it's a hair system or whether it's surgical hair restoration. That's just, my personality. And there's so many guys like us. I mean, you look at Specs, and Specs, you say I give you shit for saying that you've had 10 hair transplants, but that's, for a lot of guys, even though they're small, that's relatively extreme. So
it is extreme. It's fucking off the chart extreme. It is. I'm not. I hold my hand up. I'm a completely I am at the other end of the scale, and hair loss affected me. It's really interesting. It's something we've touched on before. Hair loss physically affected me at a very young age, 21. For me, it was a huge part of my identity at that point. And for me, it was very important for me to salvage and maintain and do something about my hair. I think the younger that you are, potentially affects you more psychologically, and it can really affect your self-esteem and confidence as a young man. Now, as you get older, maybe people can deal. If you were to lose your hair a little bit older, maybe you can deal with it better because you're in a different point in your life. You're a little bit more streetwise, you're a little bit more established. However, as you know, Spencer, we meet with a lot of guys and we interact with a lot of guys, and it doesn't necessarily really matter how old they are. So hair loss is all relative to the individual, and some people can definitely deal with it better than others. Some people are much better equipped to deal with it psychologically than others, like Jolyon, and fair play. However, like Jolyon touched on there, given the choice, would you rather have hair than not? I don't think there's one person on the planet, it's a bit extreme. I think the majority of people would much prefer to have hair than not. Now, the fact is, given the internet, given the fact that we can communicate so regularly, so freely, we can be made aware of what is available to hair loss sufferers now if they want to do something about it. I agree with Jolyon wholeheartedly. The more that people fixate on the issue, the bigger the issue becomes. And definitely with people that reside in the forum communities have established themselves because of the need for people to find information and want to establish information. If there wasn't the need, the forums wouldn't exist. There is only like a small amount, it's a drop in the ocean, the number of people that do actually communicate on the forums as hair loss sufferers that are affected by hair loss psychologically. Not everybody goes to the forums. So I agree a little bit with what you're saying, Jolyon. I don't necessarily agree with all of it. I'm obviously a highly neurotic individual when it comes to my hair loss. So I'm obviously a little bit biased with regards to it. But also I interact with a lot of people across all the demographics, and it is all relative to that individual. But, coming back to the original kind of kudos with regards to the research that you did with regards to, I was just interested to know what your thoughts were, given the fact that you're coming from a much more level-headed position of being a hair loss sufferer, yet it doesn't really affect you that much. It was really interesting to me to obtain your opinion, because I thought you put an excellent piece of journalist content together. And we're really glad to have you on the show, and I think you've brought some great food to the table with regards to discussion, especially with regards to your opinion on the emotional aspects of hair loss.
I tell you, I'm jealous of this guy. I wish that I had that, the wherewithal to be equipped the way that you are, Jolyon, about this. Because,
I'll tell you what I find strange is that on the forums, a lot of the young guys who are worried and post pictures of themselves or even videos, as far as I can see, they're not really losing their hair.
Yeah.
I mean, they look pretty good to me, and some of them are worried because their father has lost his hair, so they think they've been dealt a bad genetic hand, or else they don't see that a slightly receding hairline is normal. I mean, I think Speck said this to me. You'd look crazy if you had the same hairline in your 40s as you did when you were 17.
Look, I have 22-year-old kids that still, on my own forum, will bust on me about the recession in my hairline. I'm 47 years old. I mean, where do they want it to be? By my eyebrows? But this is the way these guys, unfortunately, especially when they're that age, they're so used to, you have to understand that they're in the beginning throes of their hair loss, so they're so used to, or actually they remember what they looked like, say, 2 or 3 years ago. And when they see that recession, to them, it's a significant change. It's opening up their face. It's changing the framing of their face. So they see that their looks are changing. It may not be changing for the worse. Go ahead.
What worries me is the way in which they, as soon as they have some kind of romantic or sexual setback in their lives, which everybody has, I mean, particularly when you're younger and you don't really know what you're doing, they blame it on their hair loss, and then sometimes it turns into a kind of there's quite a streak of misogyny on some of the forums where they think that all women are kind of against them and out to get them, and also then that feeds into this problem with the the alleged side effects of some of the of the drugs, and they end up in a very neurotic place, and a lot of it is just they don't understand that it takes a while to learn how to deal with women. I mean, we're all still learning that.
I haven't learned yet. I'm still trying to learn.
Spencer's definitely still learning.
I'm almost 50 years old, for crying out loud.
Yeah, well, I'm older than you, and I still feel like I've got a lot to learn. But,
you're right, Jolyon. You are right. It's all about perspective, and a lot of these guys can get a little bit too down deep into the rabbit's warren, and they can lose all perspective. And often I feel, as I've mentioned on other shows, unfortunately the forums, as good as they are and as great as the information that can flow, unfortunately they can become the enemy in terms of just too much information.
I
you can
agree.
just get too absorbed in it, and it becomes, if you have a kind of obsessive compulsive disorder anyway, you can become like heavily dependent on the forums as an outlet, and it's not healthy. It isn't healthy. And as you've just clarified, since the program, you became quite self-conscious over the hair. You've moved on. You've got busy. You don't interact daily on the forums. You have now in a much better place, and you're not even thinking about your hair loss. And I think there's something to be said in that the least time you spend thinking about it, the easier it's going to be to process it, potentially.
Yeah. When the man from the Times came to photograph me and took, hundreds of photographs, and I realized halfway through that it wasn't really my hair I was worried about, it was my teeth.
That's an easy fix. That's an easy fix.
Yeah. Well, it's. I was thinking, if I got the money, should I get my hair fixed or my teeth? But then, there's the liposuction as well to think about. So,
But that's interesting that you say that, because I have counseled people. I've spoken to them on the air, and I let them know that surgical hair restoration is probably one of the most difficult and emotional, in my view, cosmetic surgeries available today for several reasons. One is it's really difficult it's difficult to replace the hair that you once had. Really, hair transplantation is an illusion of what you once had. And it takes about a year to see the final results of a single procedure. So the emotional roller coaster that you go on when you're dealing with, and Specs can say that, knows this better than me, obviously, dealing with watching, hoping that the hair is going to grow, and the ugly duckling stage and all that stuff, it could be just a horrendous situation for guys who just are not equipped to deal with it. So, in my view, if you have other things that maybe need to be tweaked, And you can live with the fact that you actually don't have hair, but you're more concerned that you don't have hair because maybe you have a bigger nose or your ears stick out or you have bad teeth. Those are relatively easy things to get fixed compared to having surgical intervention. And I
will say that Specs' hair does look very good. This is an unsolicited testimonial, but he's a walking advertisement for whoever he went to.
It's amazing. You know, I had never met Specs until... It is a miracle. Well said. I had never met Specs, and he came to.
What are you up to? What are you up to now? Where is this leading?
But he came to my house, and I could not. I wouldn't in a million years, and I'm in this industry. I would never have thought he had a hair transplant. I'm telling you. I mean, and it's.
I'm blushing now.
No, it's true. And I think there are people, I'm glad that you said this, Jolyon. I think there are people who think that I'm biased because, I'm involved in the industry and, and that I know Specs and that Specs is now, working with the show. It's the truth, Specs. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I think that, when a guy like Jolyon comes in and he's doing a piece on this, no pun intended again, and he sees a guy like you who has had so many hair transplants, and you can see how natural it looks. I think it's probably pretty unbelievable. You were probably...
You don't want to look too closely. I want to qualify it a bit. I mean, as he says, it is the illusion of a full head of hair.
Right.
It isn't completely the real thing. But it passes pretty well. I wouldn't say close inspection, but it passes normal inspection, I would say.
Absolutely, and that's really what it is. People are in a social environment. They're not going to be looking at your scalp with a magnifying glass, or
you hope not, no.
Unless you're Specs.
Yeah.
Jolyon, I really appreciate the compliment. I do. Indeed, and you looked very closely. You were like a little monkey rummaging through there. But yeah,
we should have got that on video. That would be something.
I think we'd have been
luckily Jolyon cut out the dialogue that was going on.
What did Jolyon...
I think at the end of the day, I am fortunate to have been repaired as well. I mean, I was a repair patient, so I'm it is a sense of, for me, I had to continue to have further surgery to get through the tunnel and out the other side. If you'd have met me several years ago, Jolyon, and you'd have seen me, you'd have thought, gosh, hair restoration was not for anybody. But I appreciate your kind words, and coming from somebody who just isn't in the industry and, as you say, completely unbiased, it's reassuring to me. I mean, I've had my head inspected by many, many, many people, really scrutinizing it, and they've, they do feel it's very, very natural.
Jolyon, you could have really screwed him up if you said it didn't look that great.
Yeah, you could have. You really could have. I'd have been so paranoid.
Forget about his business.
I'd have gone back to the wig.
Forget about his business. I mean, he would have been just emotionally destroyed. I mean, I know this guy. But now, listen, I get that. I certainly get. Let me ask you this: your colleagues, other guys, people at the BBC, when you were doing this documentary, I mean, what were their thoughts? And
they were fascinated by it.
They were.
Yeah. They really were, and I made 3 programs in this series, and the other 2 had nothing to do with this. They were completely separate, different subjects, and I wasn't sure which was the best one to put first, which ones people would be most interested in. But everybody wanted to know about this, and they were all interested in the kind of the social dynamics of it. What's it actually like to get your hair transplanted? About men who don't tell their wives they're doing it, about this whole idea of the forums. The idea, they were actually quite interested in the idea that there is such a job as being a hair loss guru or a hair loss consultant. I mean, it's kind of opening up an entire new world to them. So it was. I dined out on it for weeks. Everybody was interested.
Let me tell you, you have no idea how difficult it is for me to try to explain what I do in a social setting. It's one of the most uncomfortable things. And sometimes I just tell somebody like I'm a builder, I'm in construction or something. 'Cause I don't want to deal with it. And then what happens is, no one is looking at my hair, when we're out. And then as soon as I start talking about it, all their eyes drift up to your hair. So you're even more uncomfortable. So
that must be a problem.
It's a big problem. But I could tell you that after, hearing the response from the BBC piece. It's not just me. It's not just Specs. Everyone in the industry who contacted me about it said that it was really. I mean, it was so well done. And the reason I think that it was so well done is because I at least from our conversations, you were really looking at it from another side. It wasn't just the typical drugs, plugs, and rugs. You were looking at it from the psychological aspect of how it affects people's lives. And listen, the forums are fascinating. I mean, if I was looking at this from the outside, I would be like, what the F? This is insanity. What do you see that's going on in these forums? But again, it's very, I think it's very telling as far as the psychology of hair loss. And it may be for a subset of guys, but I think it's probably more guys than society is willing to admit. It really does affect, I would say the majority of guys.
I'd agree with you there. I think it is. And the other thing which somebody said to me is that they were kind of surprised by how understanding a lot of women are about this. Women who go, I can't remember whether this made it into the program, but a lot of men, when they go along to have their system renewed, they'll take their wives with them, but the wife won't actually see it being done. They'll sort of sit outside in a waiting room, and for every woman who is kind of hostile to a bald man, there's a partner there who's actually often quite understanding about it, and I think that was quite a kind of that.
Well, I think women understand. Women are under tremendous societal pressure to look good, and you know what? There's not a woman past the age of 13, 14 that doesn't present themselves to the world, without some makeup or their hair dyed, and then as they get older, it just becomes more of a cover-up. They're wearing push-up bras and fake nails and fake tans, and you meet a woman at the bar, she's like it's like she's wearing a disguise. So I kind of think that they, maybe there's a certain, probably a larger percentage of women than you think that kind of understand why their mate, their partner wants to look as good as they can, and why they might be affected by something that's kind of eroding, at least in their minds, eroding their appearance.